Hello, my friend. There's an ocean hidden inside the earth, sealed in the rock far beneath the deepest sea. Buried somewhere below you lies a piece of another world, a lost planet that no longer exists. There is a place where the pull of gravity grows strangely weak, and there are storms that quietly make antimatter high above the clouds. The whole planet is ringing, very softly, like a bell that never stops. And scattered across the earth are tiny grains of dust that are older than the sun. You are lying on a world you think you know. Solid ground, familiar sky, the same old earth you were born on. And yet almost everything about it is stranger than it seems. Tonight we will wander through 20 strange truths about this quiet, astonishing planet. Some are facts that science has carefully measured. Some are wild ideas still argued over in laboratories around the world. And a few will sound like dreams, even though they are completely real. So let yourself grow still. Settle into the warmth of where you are and let your breathing slow. You do not need to remember any of this or follow along. Each strange truth stands on its own, like a smooth stone resting in a long, calm river. Let them wash over you, one by one. Some you will hear, and some you will sleep straight through, and both are perfectly fine. Let the world go quiet, and let us begin. There is an ocean hidden inside the earth. You might picture a cave full of water, or some dark underground lake. The truth is far stranger than that. Far below the deepest sea, below the crust, below miles upon miles of solid rock, there is water locked inside the stone itself. And there may be more of it down there than in every ocean on the surface of the world combined. To find it, picture yourself slowly sinking, down past the floor of the sea, down through the cool gray crust, down to a place around 400 miles beneath your feet, where the rock grows hot and dense and crushed under unimaginable weight. This is a hidden layer of the planet that scientists call the transition zone. And it is here, in the deep dark, that the secret water lives. This water does not slosh or pool the way it does on the surface, and it is not even liquid. Instead, it is bonded into the structure of a mineral, locked into the crystal grain by grain. The mineral is called ringwoodite, and it is a beautiful deep blue, the color of a sky just after sunset. Each crystal can hold a small amount of water inside it, held quietly between the atoms. And there is so much of this blue mineral down there, spread across such an enormous region, that all those tiny amounts add up to something staggering. For a long time, this was only an idea. Scientists suspected that the deep rock might hold water, but no one had ever seen it. The transition zone lies far too deep to drill. We will almost certainly never reach it ourselves. So how could anyone ever know for certain what was waiting down there? The answer came riding up to the surface, sealed inside a diamond. Diamonds are born deep within the earth, under tremendous heat and pressure, and now and then they are carried slowly upward by ancient eruptions over millions of years. As a diamond grows, it sometimes traps a tiny fleck of the rock around it, sealing it away like a message folded into a bottle. In one small, cloudy diamond from Brazil, a stone that no one would look at twice, researchers found exactly such a fleck. It was a grain of blue ringwoodite, carried up from hundreds of miles below. And when they studied it, they found that it was holding water. Real water, locked inside the crystal, brought up from the hidden heart of the planet. That single grain changed the way we picture the world beneath us. If that one piece of the deep was wet, and the deep is full of that same blue mineral, then the amount of water bound into the rock could be vast beyond easy belief. Some careful estimates suggest the transition zone might hold the equivalent of 1, 2, even 3 times all the water in all the oceans on the surface. We cannot measure it directly, so these remain estimates rather than certainties. But the picture they paint is almost too large to hold in the mind. An entire planet, with its blue seas and its falling rain, may be resting upon a deeper, hidden reservoir far greater than anything we can see. Sit with what that means for a moment. The water you drink, the rain on the window, the rivers and the seas, all the water that makes this a living world, may be only the thinnest film upon something much larger. We call our planet the blue marble, and we imagine the oceans as its great defining feature. And yet the real ocean, the deepest one, may be the sea we will never sail, sealed forever inside the stone beneath our feet. No one yet knows the full story of how this water came to be there, or how it moves between the deep rock and the surface across the slow ages of the earth. Some scientists believe it has been quietly shaping our world for billions of years, helping to soften the rock far below, helping the continents to drift, keeping the surface gentle enough for life to take hold. A buried sea we cannot touch, and yet one that may have helped make everything we love possible. So tonight, as you lie here, picture it. Far, far below you, deeper than any well, deeper than any mine, there is blue stone resting in the dark, holding water the way the sand holds the memory of the tide. Silent, still, patient beyond all imagining, an ocean inside the earth that has been waiting there since long before the first creature ever opened its eyes. And it is there still, holding its breath beneath you as you close your own eyes and rest. Far beneath your feet, 2 enormous shapes lie pressed against the core of the earth, and no one is entirely sure what they are. They are vast. Each one is roughly the size of a continent, and they rise up from the very bottom of the rocky world like 2 great mountains made of something denser and stranger than ordinary stone. One of them sits deep beneath Africa. The other rests on the far side of the planet, beneath the Pacific Ocean. They have been there, in the heat and the dark, for an almost unthinkable span of time. And we know they exist at all only because of the way the whole Earth rings. When a great earthquake shakes the planet, it sends waves humming all the way through the deep interior, the way a struck bell hums through the air. Scientists listen for those waves as they arrive on the far side of the world. By timing them, by noticing where they slow and where they bend, they can map the hidden shapes the waves have passed through, much as a doctor can map the inside of a body without ever opening it. Again and again, the waves revealed the very same thing. Down at the base of the rock, 2 colossal regions where the waves slow and drag, 2 great blobs where the deep material is somehow different from everything around it. For decades, this was one of the quiet mysteries of the planet. We could feel that the blobs were there. We could trace the outline of their edges, and yet their true nature stayed hidden, where they had come from and how they had survived so long without simply mixing back into the rest of the earth. They were 2 strange islands at the bottom of the world, waiting for an explanation. And then came an idea so bold that it sounds like a story told around a fire. To understand it, you have to travel back to the very beginning, to a time before the moon. In those first wild years of the solar system, the young Earth was not alone. There was another world sharing its path around the sun, a planet about the size of Mars. Scientists have given it a name. They call it Theia, and the two worlds were drifting onto a collision course. When they finally met, it was not a gentle touch. It was one of the most violent events our planet has ever known. Theia struck the young Earth and shattered, and the heat of that impact melted the outer worlds together and flung a great spray of molten rock out into space. That glowing ring of debris slowly gathered itself over time into a single pale companion. It became the moon. This much is widely accepted today. The moon you see through the window was very likely born from a collision between the Earth and another world. But here's the newer, wilder thought. When Theia struck, where did the rest of it go? Some scientists now propose that the heart of Theia, the dense material from deep inside that lost planet, did not bounce away into space. Instead, it sank. It plunged down through the molten young Earth, all the way to the bottom, and settled against the core, far too heavy and too different ever to rise and blend back in. And there, the idea goes, it has remained ever since. Those two great blobs at the base of the mantle may be the buried remains of Theia, the world that died to give us the moon. It is worth being honest about this. The idea is recent, and it is still a theory, one of several being argued over by scientists right now. The blobs themselves are real, measured, and mapped many times over. But whether they are truly the wreckage of another planet or something that formed here on Earth all along is a question that is still very much open. And that is part of what makes it so wonderful. We are watching scientists try to solve a mystery in real time, reaching back 4.5 billion years to a collision that no one will ever see. Still, let yourself rest with the possibility. If it is true, then the ground beneath you is not made of earth alone. Far below, sealed at the bottom of everything, lie the remains of a vanished sister world. A planet that no longer exists except as two silent shapes pressed against our core and as the moon that lights our nights. We tend to think of the Earth as one whole thing, complete in itself. But it may be more like a place where two worlds came together long ago and never fully parted. One of them became the ground we walk on and the deep heart of the planet. The other became the soft light that has watched over every single night of human history. So tonight, as the moon rises somewhere over the curve of the world, picture those two ancient shapes far below you. Quiet, enormous, older than the oceans, older than the air. The last resting place, perhaps, of a world that gave everything to make ours. While you lie here in the dark, resting gently upon them, drifting towards sleep. There is a place in the Indian Ocean where the pull of the earth grows weak. We tend to think of gravity as something steady and everywhere the same. You feel it holding you to the bed right now, gentle and constant, the same here as anywhere. And for the most part, that is true. But the earth is not a perfect, even ball. It is lumpy and uneven on the inside, with regions of heavier rock and lighter rock scattered all through its depths. Where the rock below is lighter, with a little less mass gathered beneath you, gravity's grip is just slightly looser. Where it is heavier, the pull is a touch stronger. The differences are tiny, far too small for any person to feel. But they are real, and they can be measured, and they have left their mark upon the sea. Out in the Indian Ocean, south of the tip of India, there is the largest such weak spot on the entire planet. Scientists call it the Indian Ocean Geoid Low, It is an enormous region where gravity is gentler than it should be, and the result is strange and beautiful. Because the pull there is weaker, the ocean itself responds. Water is drawn most strongly toward places of greater gravity, and so it gathers there and thins out over the weak spot. The surface of the sea across this vast area actually sits lower than the surface of the sea elsewhere, and not by a few inches, but by more than 300 feet. Take a moment to picture that. If you could somehow still the restless waves and the tides and see the true shape of the ocean surface, the face of the sea as gravity alone would hold it, you would find a great shallow valley in the water, a dent in the ocean, hundreds of feet deep and more than 1,000 miles wide, held in place not by any current but by the quiet weakness of the earth below. The water is not missing, it is simply settling into a hollow that gravity has carved for it. A vast bowl in the sea with no walls that you could ever touch. For a long time, the cause of this great low was a genuine puzzle. Something deep inside the earth had to be pulling less than usual. But what? What could leave such an enormous fingerprint on the planet's gravity, large enough to bend the very shape of an ocean? One leading explanation reaches far back into the planet's past, and it has the feel of a quiet ghost story. Long ago, there was an ancient ocean on the surface of the earth, an old sea that has since vanished as the continents drifted and rearranged themselves over millions of years. The floor of that lost ocean slid down into the depths of the planet, sinking slowly toward the core. As those cold, sinking slabs of old seafloor settled deep within the earth, the idea goes, they stirred the hot rock around them and helped send up great plumes of lighter, hotter material, rising slowly toward the surface. It may be this rising column of lighter rock beneath the Indian Ocean, less dense than its surroundings, that loosens gravity's hold and shapes the low. It is worth being clear that scientists are still working this out. The geoid low itself is real and carefully measured, but the exact reason for it is still being studied and debated. The story of the sinking ancient ocean and the rising plume is the leading idea, supported by computer models of how the deep earth has moved across the ages. But the deep earth keeps its secrets well, and the final answer is not yet settled. There is something humbling in all of this. We like to imagine that we understand the ground beneath us, that the world is mapped and fully known. And yet here's a hole in the planet's own gravity, larger than many countries, quietly shaping an entire ocean, and we are still piecing together why it is there. The earth is stranger than the steady, solid thing we walk across each day. It also gently rearranges how you might think about gravity itself. Gravity is not a fixed, unchanging rule pressing down from above. It is a living echo of everything inside the planet, every heavy slab and every rising plume, every ancient sea that sank long ago into the dark. When you feel your own weight settling softly into the bed tonight, you are feeling the sum of all that hidden architecture, the whole deep body of the earth gathered into one steady and gentle pull. So picture that faraway place, out where the warm Indian Ocean stretches toward the horizon. The waves move as they always do, and a ship passing through would notice nothing at all. But beneath the surface, the sea is resting in a vast and gentle hollow, leaning toward the memory of a vanished ocean far below. A quiet dent in the world, older than memory, holding its shape in the dark, while you grow lighter with every breath. And sleep begins to carry you down. The day is slowly getting longer, and it has been for billions of years. Right now, a day lasts 24 hours. It feels fixed, as permanent as anything in your life. The sun rises, the sun sets, and tomorrow it will surely do the same. But the length of a day is not fixed at all. It is changing, slowly and steadily, and the reason is hanging in the sky above you tonight. It is the moon. The moon and the earth are bound together by gravity, each one pulling on the other across the empty space between them. As the moon pulls on the earth, it tugs most strongly on the oceans, raising the great slow swells we call the tides. But the earth is spinning quickly beneath those swells, far faster than the moon travels around us. And so our spin drags the tidal bulge slightly ahead, a little in front of where the moon actually sits. That displaced bulge of water, in turn, pulls back on the moon, and the result is a gentle, endless exchange. The spinning Earth is very slowly handing some of its motion to the moon. Two quiet things happen because of this. The first is that the moon is drifting away from us. Each year it moves a few centimeters farther out into space, about the width of your fingers. We know this with remarkable precision, because long ago astronauts left mirrors resting on the surface of the moon, and to this day we bounce beams of light off them and measure, down to the smallest fraction, how the distance grows. The moon you see tonight is a little farther away than the moon your grandparents saw, and far, far farther away than the moon that once hung over the dinosaurs. The second thing is that the Earth's spin is slowing down. As we hand our motion outward to the moon, we turn just slightly more lazily on our axis. Each day grows longer by only the tiniest sliver of time, a fraction of a second across an entire century, far too small for anyone to notice in a single lifetime. But the Earth has been doing this for an almost endless stretch of time, and tiny changes added up across billions of years become enormous. This is where it becomes truly wonderful. If you could travel back to the age of the dinosaurs, you would find days that were noticeably shorter than ours, closer to 23 hours long. The great creatures of that world lived their lives a little faster against the clock, with the sun wheeling overhead just slightly more quickly than it does for us. And if you went back much further still, to the young Earth not long after the moon was born, you would find a planet spinning in a wild, dizzying blur. In those ancient days, a single day may have lasted only about 6 hours. The sun would have leapt up, raced across the sky, and plunged down again, over and over, while a huge and close moon loomed enormous on the horizon. These deep figures are careful estimates rather than perfect measurements, pieced together from clues hidden inside old rocks and even from the growth lines of ancient shells, which laid down tiny bands day by day and quietly recorded how many days once fit inside a single year. But the larger story is well understood and widely agreed upon. The Earth once spun fast, and it has been gently winding down ever since, slowed by the constant, faithful pull of the moon. And it does not stop with us. Far into the future, the days will keep on stretching, growing longer and longer as the moon drifts farther and farther away. Long after we are gone, this world may turn so slowly that a single day lasts longer than what we now call a month. The frantic little planet of the deep past will have become something almost unrecognizably calm, turning in the sunlight with a great and unhurried patience. There is something tender in this if you let yourself feel it. We think of time as something we are caught inside, rushing past us, always the same length, always slipping away too fast. But time itself, even the simple length of a day, turns out to be soft and changeable on the scale of the world. The hours are not carved in stone. They are slowly lengthening, gift by gift, as the earth and the moon move through their long and graceful farewell across the sky. So tonight, as you lie here, know that this day was very slightly longer than yesterday, and tomorrow will be longer still, by an amount no clock you own could ever catch. The moon is drifting outward in the dark, and the earth is turning a little more slowly beneath you, easing toward rest in its own unhurried way. The whole planet is slowing down, just a little, just as you are. Let it carry you gently with it into the long and quiet night. At the very center of the earth, there is a ball of metal as hot as the surface of the sun. It is hard to believe, lying here on the cool, calm ground. The surface of our world is mild and gentle, made for soft grass and falling rain and quiet evenings like this one. But the world has layers, like an enormous fruit, and the deeper you go, the hotter it becomes. Down past the crust, down through the thick rocky mantle, down thousands of miles into the dark, the heat climbs and climbs until, at the very heart of the planet, it reaches a temperature almost beyond imagining. The core of the Earth burns at around 5,000 degrees, roughly the same searing heat as the glowing surface of the sun itself. There is a star's worth of fire buried at the center of the world, and you live upon its cool skin, never feeling more than the faintest warmth of it rising slowly through the miles of rock. But here's the part that turns the whole picture strange. With all of that heat, you would expect the very center of the Earth to be molten, a churning sea of liquid metal, and yet it is not. The innermost heart of the planet, the inner core, is solid. It is a vast sphere of solid iron, hotter than melting, and still it holds its solid shape. How can something be hotter than melting and yet refuse to melt? The answer is pressure. Crushing, almost unimaginable pressure. To reach the center of the Earth, you would have to pass beneath the entire weight of the planet. All those thousands of miles of rock and metal press inward toward the middle, squeezing the core from every side at once with a force that is nearly impossible to picture. The pressure at the heart of the Earth is millions of times greater than the pressure of the air around you now. And pressure like that changes the rules. It packs the atoms of iron so tightly together that they simply cannot break free and flow, no matter how hot they become. The heat wants to melt them. The pressure refuses to let go. And in that endless standoff, the iron stays solid, locked into a single colossal crystal at the center of the world. Stranger still, just above that solid heart lies a layer where the pressure is a little less, and there the iron does give way and turn to liquid. So the Earth holds a solid inner core wrapped inside a liquid outer core, both made of the very same scorching metal, divided only by the slow change in the weight pressing down upon them. A solid heart, floating in a sea of molten iron, at temperatures that would melt away almost anything you have ever touched. And that hidden churning metal does something for us that is easy to overlook. As the liquid outer core swirls and flows around the solid center, it acts like an enormous, invisible engine, and it generates the magnetic field of the Earth. That field reaches far out into space and wraps the whole planet in a protective shell, turning aside the constant stream of particles that pours off the sun. Without that deep, hot, restless core, the gentle world above might have been stripped bare and dry long ago. The fire at the center of the Earth is part of what keeps the surface soft enough to hold an ocean and an atmosphere, and you. There is something quietly moving in that thought. We stand on the calm and grassy surface and imagine the Earth to be a still and solid thing, but it is alive with heat all the way down, a small sun sealed in iron and stone beating slowly at the center of everything. And the very fierceness of that buried fire is what allows the softness above. The storms of the deep make the stillness of the surface possible. The inner core is even, very slowly, still growing. As the Earth gives up its heat to space across the long ages, the outermost edge of that liquid metal sea is gradually cooling and freezing onto the solid heart, a fraction of an inch each year. The center of the planet is slowly turning to solid iron, season by season, age by age, in total darkness, far beneath every living thing. So as you rest tonight on the quiet skin of the world, let yourself feel, just for a moment, the immense and ancient heat below. Thousands of miles down, there is a solid metal heart as hot as a star, wrapped in a glowing ocean of iron, holding its shape under the weight of an entire planet. It has been burning there since before the first day ever dawned, and it will go on burning long after this night is forgotten. A small sun in the dark, keeping the whole world warm and safe and alive, while you drift gently off to sleep upon it. Every so often, across the long history of the Earth, the north and south of the planet quietly trade places. You carry a sense of north and south with you everywhere. Even now, a compass needle anywhere in the world will swing and settle and point the way north, guided by the invisible magnetic field of the Earth. That field surrounds the whole planet, flowing out of one pole and curving around to the other, wrapping the world in soft, unseen lines of force. It feels like one of the most dependable things there is. North is north. It always has been, except that it has not. Across the deep history of the Earth, the magnetic field has reversed itself again and again. The north magnetic pole has become the south, and the south has become the north, flipping completely, hundreds of times across the ages. If you had stood here with a compass at certain moments in the distant past, the needle would have pointed not toward the Arctic, but toward Antarctica. And one day, far in the future, it very likely will again. We know this happened because the Earth keeps a record of it, written into stone. When molten rock cools and hardens, the tiny grains of iron inside it freeze into place, pointing along the magnetic field of that moment, like countless miniature compass needles locked forever into the rock. Layer by layer, age by age, the rocks of the Earth preserve the direction the field was pointing when they formed. And when scientists read those layers, especially the long stripes of rock spreading out across the ocean floor, they find the pattern laid bare. Bands pointing one way, then the other, then back again. North, south, north, south. A slow heartbeat of reversals stretching back across millions of years. What causes it lies far beneath you, in the deep heart of the planet. The magnetic field is made by the swirling of liquid iron in the Earth's outer core, an enormous, restless ocean of molten metal in constant motion. That motion is not perfectly steady. It churns and shifts in ways that are difficult to predict, and now and then the great currents tangle and weaken and reorganize themselves. When they do, the field they create can fade, scramble, and eventually settle, pointing the other way. A reversal is not sudden. It is not the world flipping over in a day. It unfolds slowly, across many centuries or even thousands of years as the field weakens, grows confused, and then builds itself back up in the opposite direction. And here's the part that brings the story into our own time. The magnetic field of the Earth is weakening right now. Over the last couple of centuries, since people first began measuring it carefully, the field has grown noticeably weaker, and there is one place where this is especially clear. Over the South Atlantic, stretching towards South America, there is a large region where the field has become unusually faint, a kind of soft spot in the planet's magnetic shield. Scientists call it the South Atlantic anomaly, and it is slowly growing and shifting as the years pass. Satellites that fly through it are exposed to more radiation from space, and the people who operate them sometimes power down sensitive instruments as they cross it, because the usual protection of the Earth's field is thinner there. It is tempting to wonder whether this means a great reversal is finally on its way. And this is exactly where we should be careful and honest, because the truth is that nobody knows. The weakening is real and well measured, but the field has weakened before and then recovered without ever flipping at all. It may be the early sign of a reversal still thousands of years away, or it may be a passing change that quietly fades again. Scientists are watching closely, and they will tell you plainly that it cannot yet be predicted. This is a genuine open question, not a settled forecast, and certainly not a reason for alarm. It helps to remember that the Earth has done this countless times, and life has always carried on. Through reversal after reversal, the creatures of the world kept living, kept breathing, kept raising their young. The change is slow, far slower than a single life. Slow enough that the world barely seems to notice from one generation to the next. Birds and turtles and the many other animals that find their way by the field have weathered every flip the planet has ever known. The poles wander, the field fades and returns, and the gentle business of living goes on beneath it all. There is something strangely peaceful in knowing this. The very idea of north, one of the steadiest things we have, turns out to be a slow and shifting thing, breathing in and out across unimaginable spans of time. The compass that seems so certain is only reading the mood of a molten sea far below, and that sea, like everything else in the earth, is always quietly changing. So tonight, let north be north, soft and sure outside your window, but know that it is held in place by a living field, born from an ocean of liquid iron turning slowly in the dark heart of the world. That field has flipped 100 times and more across the ages, and it will flip again someday, long after this night. The planet keeps its own slow rhythms, far beneath our hurried little lives. And under that vast and patient field, you are safe and held and free to drift away into sleep. Deep at the center of the Earth, there is a solid metal world that turns on its own. You know that the whole planet spins, of course. It carries you around once each day from darkness into light and back into darkness again. But the very heart of the Earth, the solid iron inner core, is not bolted rigidly to the rest of it. It sits surrounded by a sea of liquid metal, the molten outer core, and because it floats freely in that sea, it can turn at its own pace, slightly faster or slightly slower than the ground you are lying on. There is a hidden sphere at the center of the world, a solid ball of iron more than 1,000 miles across, spinning quietly inside the planet and keeping its own time. This alone is a strange and wonderful thing to picture. A solid iron heart, suspended in liquid metal far beneath your feet, free to turn a little out of step with everything above it. For a long time, scientists believed it was spinning ever so slightly faster than the rest of the Earth, edging gradually ahead year by year in a slow and steady lead. But recently, that simple picture has been turned on its head. To study something so impossibly deep, scientists become listeners. They cannot see the inner core. No light has ever reached it, and nothing we build will ever touch it. So instead, they wait for earthquakes. When an earthquake strikes, it sends seismic waves ringing through the body of the planet, and some of those waves pass directly through the inner core before arriving at instruments on the far side of the world. By comparing waves from earthquakes that happen in the same place but years apart, scientists can notice tiny changes in how the waves move through the core. And those changes hint at how the inner core has turned in the time between them. When one team looked closely at decades of these waves, they found something unexpected. The inner core, they suggested, had gradually slowed in its spin relative to the surface, until around the year 2009 it seemed to pause, briefly turning at the very same pace as the rest of the planet. And then, they proposed, it began to turn the other way, drifting slowly backward relative to the ground above. None of this touched the surface or changed a single day or night for any of us. It was a gentle turning point, hidden deep in the dark, far below all of our quiet lives. And this, they believe, may be part of a long, slow rhythm. The idea is that the inner core does not simply spin ahead forever. Instead, it may rock gently back and forth over time, drifting a little ahead of the planet, then slowing, pausing, and drifting a little behind, then easing forward once more. A single full cycle of this slow dance may take around 70 years, roughly the span of a human life. If that is so, then somewhere in the depths of the earth, the iron heart of the world may be moving through a rhythm so slow that a person could live their whole life and witness only a single swing of it. It is important to hold this gently, because it is new and it is debated. The inner core does turn a little differently from the rest of the Earth. That much most scientists accept. But exactly how, and how fast, and whether it truly pauses and reverses across a cycle of about 70 years is still very much an open argument. Other researchers, reading the same faint signals, suggest different rhythms, or question the picture altogether. We are listening to the deepest place in the world through the thin echoes of distant earthquakes, and the message is faint and hard to read. This is science in the very middle of its work, still reaching toward an answer, and that uncertainty is part of the wonder rather than a flaw in it. What stays with you in the end is the sheer hiddenness of it. Right now, as you lie here in the quiet, there is a vast sphere of solid iron at the center of the planet, slowly turning in the dark. Perhaps it is creeping ahead of the world tonight. Perhaps it is drifting gently back. It moves through its long, slow rhythm, whether anyone watches or not, whether anyone has ever known that it was there at all. For almost the whole of human history, no one had any idea that the earth held a turning heart. And it was turning all along beneath every life that has ever been lived. There's a strange comfort in that. So much of the world goes on without us, far beyond our reach and our noticing, moving through rhythms far longer than our own. The iron heart of the earth keeps its slow time, faithful and unhurried, easing gently forward and back across the centuries. We will never see it, and we will never touch it. and still it turns, patient and deep, holding the center of the world together. So tonight, picture it there, far below you in the dark, a solid metal sphere glowing with heat, turning quietly inside the planet at its own gentle pace. It has been spinning since long before you were born, and it will go on spinning long after this night has passed into morning. Let its slow and steady turning settle you. The deep heart of the world is keeping time, gentle and sure, as you let go and drift and sleep. The moon orbits inside the Earth's atmosphere. It sounds impossible. We are taught that the air ends somewhere far below the moon, that space begins just above the clouds, a thin blue line, and then nothing. And in every way that matters for breathing, that is true. But the very edge of our atmosphere does not stop where you think it does. It reaches up and out, far thinner than a whisper, until it stretches well past the moon itself. The moon, on its long monthly path around us, travels through the faint and final breath of the earth. To understand this, you have to follow the air upward. Near the ground, it is thick enough to carry birdsong and the smell of rain. Higher up, it thins and the sky darkens and the blue fades toward black. Most of the air is gone within 100 miles or so, but it does not vanish all at once. The lightest part of our atmosphere is hydrogen, the smallest and most delicate of all the elements, and the lightest atoms float highest of all. They rise into the very top of the sky and form an enormous, ghostly halo around the whole planet. Scientists call it the geocorona, the crown of the Earth. A vast cloud of hydrogen glowing softly in light the eye cannot see. For years, no one knew quite how far this crown extended. It is so thin, so close to nothing, that it is almost impossible to measure. But not long ago, scientists went back to old observations made by a spacecraft watching the sun, and they traced the faint glow of that hydrogen cloud out into the dark. What they found was astonishing. The geocorona reaches roughly 400,000 miles from the Earth, far beyond anyone had guessed, and the moon orbits at a distance of less than 250,000 miles. The numbers leave no doubt. The moon moves well within the outermost reaches of our air, wrapped in the thinning edge of the planet it circles. Now, it would be a mistake to picture this as anything you could feel. Out where the moon travels, the atmosphere is so unimaginably thin that it is almost a perfect vacuum. There might be only a tiny handful of hydrogen atoms in a space the size of a small room. You could stand inside this part of the Earth's atmosphere and never know it was there at all. There is no wind, no air to breathe, only the faintest scattering of single atoms drifting in the silence. And yet, by the careful reckoning of science, it is still our atmosphere, the thinning hem of the very same air that fills your lungs right now. This great crown is not quite a perfect sphere either. The light of the sun presses gently against it, pushing the hydrogen so that the cloud is squeezed a little on the side facing the sun and streams outward on the far side, trailing away into the dark like the faintest of tails. The whole planet moves through space, wrapped in this soft, lopsided halo, forever leaning away from the sunlight, a vast and tenuous shape far larger than the solid Earth at its heart. There is something tender in that thought. We tend to imagine the Earth as a small, sharp thing with hard edges and a clear ending, a blue marble hanging alone in the black. But the planet does not really end at its surface or even at the top of the clouds. It fades outward, gently, with no true border at all, breathing its lightest atoms into space. And the moon, our oldest companion, the light that has watched over every night of human history, is not quite as far away and separate as it seems. It is held faintly within the outermost touch of the Earth. When astronauts once stood on the surface of the moon, long ago, they brought a small camera that could see in ultraviolet light. And when they pointed it back toward home, they captured the Earth wrapped in that glowing crown of hydrogen, spreading out around the planet like a soft halo of light. They were standing, though they may not have fully realized it, within the faint outer edge of the very atmosphere they had left behind. So tonight, when you think of the moon hanging quiet in the sky, picture the truth of it. Our world reaches out farther than we ever imagined, a great invisible crown of hydrogen spreading silently into the dark, and the moon drifts through it, slow and pale and patient, bathed in the last faint breath of the Earth. We are not as small or as separate as we feel. The planet holds its moon gently, in arms of almost nothing, across all that empty space. And it holds you too, here on the warm ground, as you settle down and close your eyes to sleep. Thunderstorms make antimatter. High above the world, in the towering gray heart of a storm, something is happening that sounds like pure science fiction. The same clouds that bring rain and thunder are also, in brief and hidden flashes, building tiny amounts of antimatter, the rarest and strangest substance in the universe, and flinging it up into space. The ordinary storm you might watch from a window, with its flickering light and its distant rumble, is quietly behaving like a vast natural machine, far stranger than it appears. To feel how strange this is, it helps to know what antimatter is. For every kind of particle that makes up the ordinary world, there is a mirror version, an opposite with the reverse electrical charge. The mirror of the tiny electron is called the positron, an antimatter twin. And antimatter has a remarkable and slightly unsettling quality. When a piece of antimatter meets a piece of ordinary matter, the two destroy each other in a flash of pure energy, vanishing completely. Because of this, antimatter is almost impossible to find in the world around us. It cannot last. The moment it touches anything ordinary, it is gone. And yet thunderstorms make it, again and again in the skies above our heads. Here's how it happens. Inside a great storm cloud, enormous electrical forces build up, the same forces that eventually leap free as lightning. Sometimes those forces grab hold of stray electrons and hurl them upward, faster and faster, until they are racing along at very nearly the speed of light. When particles move that violently, they begin to give off a flood of intense radiation, a burst of gamma rays, the most energetic kind of light there is. Storms send these gamma ray flashes leaping up out of their tops, brief and brilliant, invisible to us below. And when those gamma rays carry enough energy, they can transform. A single ray of light can turn itself into a pair of particles, one ordinary electron and one positron, one small piece of matter and one small piece of antimatter, born together out of a flash of light in the sky. It is worth pausing on how fierce this is. To make antimatter, you need enormous concentrations of energy, the kind that scientists usually summon only inside great machines built for the purpose. Rings of magnets miles around. And yet an ordinary thundercloud, the same soft gray shape that drifts across a summer afternoon, can gather just that kind of violence in its heights and forge these rarest of particles in an instant, with no machine at all. We did not always know this was happening. The gamma-ray flashes themselves were only discovered a few decades ago by spacecraft built to watch the distant universe, which were surprised to catch bright bursts coming not from the stars, but from the Earth below. And then, more remarkable still, a space telescope passing high above a storm detected the unmistakable signature of antimatter. The storm had launched a beam of positrons up along the Earth's magnetic field, out into space, and some of them had struck the spacecraft itself. The instrument recorded the precise flash of light given off as that antimatter met ordinary matter and disappeared. A thunderstorm far below had reached up and touched a satellite with a beam of antimatter. Take a moment to sit with that. The same simple storm that soaks the garden and rattles the windows is, in its hidden upper reaches, a natural particle accelerator, briefly creating the most exotic substance known to science. And then, just as quickly, the antimatter is gone, annihilated against the ordinary air, leaving only a whisper of energy behind. It is one of the great quiet wonders of our planet that something so strange and so rare is being made right now in storms somewhere over the curve of the world. There is a kind of poetry in it too. We think of antimatter as something locked away in distant laboratories or scattered across the far reaches of the cosmos. And here it is, made in the clouds of our own sky, in the same weather that has watered every forest and filled every river since the world began. The exotic and the familiar turn out to be folded into the same gray afternoon. This ordinary storm is far more than it seems, and the sky above us is full of secrets. So tonight, if there is weather somewhere far away, a soft rumble of thunder over distant hills, let yourself picture what is happening at the top of those clouds. High above the rain, brief sparks of antimatter are flickering into being and vanishing again. Tiny flashes of the universe's rarest substance, born and gone in less than the blink of an eye. The world is stranger and richer than it ever lets on. And under that secret-keeping sky, you are safe and warm, drifting gently towards sleep. Above the thunderclouds, a different kind of lightning leaps upward towards space. We all know the lightning of an ordinary storm, the jagged white bolt that stabs down from the clouds to the ground, gone in an instant, followed by the roll of thunder. But far above that familiar lightning, in the thin cold air at the very edge of space, there is another world of electricity that almost no one ever sees. Strange flashes of red and blue flicker upward, away from the earth, in colors and shapes unlike anything in the storm below. They appear for the briefest moment, a few thousandths of a second, and then they are gone. For most of human history, no one knew they were there at all. The most beautiful of them are called sprites. High above a powerful storm, far higher than the clouds, a vast bloom of red light can suddenly appear, shaped a little like a great jellyfish, with a glowing body and long, thin tendrils trailing downward. A sprite can be enormous, stretching for many miles across the sky, and yet it lasts only a flicker. A soft red ghost that blooms and fades faster than the eye can follow. It hangs in a part of the atmosphere so high and so thin that it touches the edge of space, a place where the ordinary weather of the world never reaches. There are others too, blue jets which shoot upward from the tops of storm clouds in narrow cones of blue light, climbing toward the heights. And great expanding rings of light called elves, which spread outward across the sky in less than 1,000th of a second, like a ripple racing across the surface of a still pond, born from the sudden electrical pulse of a lightning stroke, far below. Together, these faint and fleeting lights form a whole hidden layer of electrical weather, playing out silently above the storms in the dark air between the clouds and the stars. To see one with your own eyes is rare and strange. You would need to be far from any city lights, looking out over a great storm crouched on the distant horizon, watching the clear sky high above it rather than the lightning below. And then perhaps, for a single heartbeat, a soft red glow would bloom against the stars and vanish again, so quick and so faint that you might wonder whether you had truly seen it at all. Most who do witness one never forget it. What makes this stranger still is how recently we learned of it. For decades, pilots flying at night would sometimes report odd flashes of light above the clouds, glimpses of red and blue where there should have been nothing. But the flashes were so brief and so faint and so hard to believe that the reports were often quietly set aside. It was not until a camera happened to catch one by accident, only a few decades ago, that science finally had its proof. There really was something up there. A whole hidden world of lightning, leaping the wrong way toward space, had been flickering above our heads all along, unseen and unrecorded, through every storm in human history. Scientists now study these lights from the ground, from aircraft, and even from the windows of the space station, watching the upper edges of storms for that telltale flash of color. They have learned a great deal about how the lights form, how the electricity of a storm can reach so high and paint the thin air with red and blue. And yet, there is still more to understand, still details being pieced together about exactly how these brief and delicate flashes come to be. They remain, in part, a mystery unfolding even now. There is something wonderful in knowing that the sky has been keeping this secret. We watch storms from below and think we see the whole of them, the rain and the bolt and the thunder. But high above in silence, the storm is also reaching upward, sending soft blooms of red and shoots of blue toward the stars, a quiet light show that played for ages with no audience at all. The world is full of these hidden performances, happening whether we are watching or not. So tonight, if a storm is passing somewhere far off, picture what is happening high above it, in the cold, thin air at the doorway of space. Great red jellyfish of light are blooming and fading in an instant. Blue flames are leaping upward toward the dark. Rings of soft light are racing outward across the sky, faster than thought, and gone before they can be seen. A secret weather, gentle and strange, playing silently above the world while it sleeps. And you, here on the quiet ground, far below all of it, can let your eyes close now and rest. The whole earth is ringing, very softly, all the time. Beneath the noise of the world, beneath the traffic and the wind and the sound of your own breathing, the planet itself is humming. It is a deep and constant vibration, a tone far too low for any ear to hear, running through the entire body of the earth without pause. The hum needs no earthquake to set it going, and it does not stop at night, or in the quiet places, or when the world seems perfectly still. Always, beneath everything, the earth is gently ringing, like an enormous bell that was struck long ago and has never once fallen silent. For a long time, no one knew this hum existed. It is so faint and so slow that special instruments were needed even to notice it. The whole planet rises and falls by only a tiny fraction of an inch as it vibrates, a motion so small and so gentle that it hides easily beneath the constant trembling of earthquakes and ocean tides. But when scientists learned to listen carefully enough, filtering away all the louder movements of the Earth, they found it there, waiting underneath. A steady, ceaseless hum, the planet quietly singing its lowest possible note. To call it a sound is almost not quite right, because no living thing could ever hear it. It lies far below the deepest note any ear can catch, slower and lower than the rumble of thunder, lower than the longest pipe of the greatest organ. A vibration you would have to feel in your bones rather than hear. If you could somehow slow your senses down to match it, the whole earth would seem to swell and settle, breathing out its single endless tone. And then came the great question. What was playing it? An earthquake can make the earth ring for a while, the way striking a bell makes it sound. But a bell struck once will slowly fade to silence. This hum never fades. Something had to be touching the planet over and over, gently and endlessly, keeping the great bell ringing year after year, century after century. For a while, the source was a genuine mystery. The answer, it turns out, is most likely the sea. Think of all the oceans of the world, restless and heavy, never still. Across their vast surfaces, waves are always rolling, driven by the wind, marching toward distant shores. When waves moving in opposite directions meet and press against each other, they create a slow pulse of pressure that reaches all the way down to the seafloor, drumming against the solid rock below. And along the coasts, the long, low swells of the ocean push against the shallow seabed, again and again with the patient rhythm of the tides. All of that endless motion, all that water pressing and pulsing on the floor of the sea, is what keeps the planet humming. The oceans are playing the earth like a vast instrument, their countless waves drumming softly on the seabed, and the whole world rings in answer. It is worth saying that scientists are still refining the details of this. The hum is real, measured many times over, and the idea that the oceans are its source is now widely accepted. But exactly how much of it comes from the deep sea and how much from the coasts and the finer workings of it all are still being studied and understood. The broad picture is clear. The finishing touches are still being added. There's something deeply moving in this if you let it settle. The sound of the ocean is the oldest comfort there is, the rhythm that lulls us by the shore. And it turns out the sea is not only soothing the people on its beaches, it is soothing the entire planet, drumming a slow and constant heartbeat into the rock. A lullaby so low and so vast that the whole earth hums along. We are rocked, all of us, by the same endless waves. It changes how you might think of silence, too. There is no true stillness anywhere on earth, no perfect quiet. Even in the deepest, calmest moment of the night, the planet beneath you is alive with a gentle, ceaseless tone, sung by the oceans and carried through the stone. You have never once been somewhere truly silent. You have only ever been somewhere quiet enough to almost feel the hum. So tonight, as you lie here in the soft dark, imagine that sound you cannot hear. Far away, the oceans are rolling as they always have, wave after wave pressing on the floor of the sea. And through the whole body of the earth, a deep and gentle note is singing, the lowest tone in the world, steady and endless and calm. The planet is ringing softly all around you, like a great bell wrapped in deep water, humming you down into sleep. Deep beneath the continents, there may be a quadrillion tons of diamond. It is a number almost too large to hold in the mind. We are not talking about a handful of precious stones or a buried treasure chest. We mean diamond on the scale of mountains and oceans, locked away in the deep roots of the earth. Far below the ground you walk on, sealed beneath the oldest and steadiest parts of the continents, there appears to be an astonishing amount of this one shining mineral, more than has ever been mined, more than will ever be reached, resting quietly in the dark. To understand how we could possibly know this, you have to remember that diamond is simply carbon, pressed and heated until its atoms lock into one of the hardest arrangements in nature. The conditions that make diamond, immense pressure and great heat, are found deep within the earth, roughly 100 miles down and more. And there, beneath the ancient cores of the continents, the conditions have been right for a very long time. Diamonds have been forming and gathering down there across billions of years, far out of sight, far out of reach. But no one has ever drilled that deep. We cannot send a shovel 100 miles into the earth. So how could anyone count a treasure no one can see? The answer, once again, lies in listening to the planet. When earthquakes send their waves rippling through the earth, those waves travel at different speeds through different kinds of rock. And diamond has a special quality. Sound moves through it remarkably fast, faster than through almost any other material in the deep earth. When scientists noticed that seismic waves were racing through the ancient roots of the continents more quickly than expected, they searched for an explanation, and the answer that fit best was diamond. A great deal of diamond scattered through that deep rock, speeding the waves on their way. From that clue, scientists made an estimate. If those deep continental roots hold even a small fraction of diamond, just 1 or 2 parts in 100, then the total amount across all the continents would come to something staggering, perhaps a quadrillion tons. That is a 1 followed by 15 zeros, a quantity so vast it has no real meaning to us. More diamond than every gem ever cut and worn in all of human history, and then far, far more. It is important to be honest that this is an estimate, not a direct sighting. No one has held this deep diamond in their hand. The figure comes from the speed of earthquake waves and from careful reasoning about what could cause it, and the true amount may be more or less than this. But the evidence points clearly to something remarkable down there, an enormous hidden store of diamond in the roots of the world. And here is the gentle twist. All of that treasure is completely beyond our reach, and it always will be. 100 miles of solid rock lies between us and those diamonds, under crushing heat and pressure. No mine could ever go so deep. The greatest diamond reserve on the planet is also the one that can never be touched, never be dug up, never be sold or set into a ring. It simply rests there in the dark, indifferent to the value we would place on it, as it has for ages beyond counting. There is something quietly humbling in that. We prize diamonds so highly up here on the surface. These little points of light passed from hand to hand, treasured and locked away. And far below, in unimaginable abundance, lies more of the very same stone than we could ever use, worth nothing at all where it lies, because no one will ever reach it. It is a kind of wealth that exists entirely outside of us, vast and serene and utterly out of reach, caring nothing for what we think it is worth. The few diamonds that do reach the surface arrive only by chance, carried up from the depths by rare and violent eruptions long ago, faint messengers from that deep and shining world. Every diamond ever found began far down there in the dark roots of a continent and rode a long, slow path upward into the light. The ones we hold are the rare travelers. The vast rest remain at home, far below. So tonight, as you lie here on the surface of the world, picture that hidden brilliance far beneath you. 100 miles down, in the ancient heart of the continents, countless diamonds rest in the darkness, more than the mind can hold, glittering for no one, in a place no light has ever reached, silent, enormous, patient beyond all measure, a treasure beyond counting, sleeping in the deep, while you drift gently off to sleep above it. There is a vast, living world hidden deep inside the rock beneath you. Not on the surface, where life is easy to see, in the grass and the trees and the birds at dawn. Down below, far down in the solid stone, miles beneath the deepest roots and the deepest wells, there are living things. Countless tiny creatures, making their homes in the cracks and pores of the rock itself, in total darkness, under tremendous pressure, far from the sun and the air. An entire hidden biosphere, living quietly inside the body of the earth that we have only recently come to know. For most of history, we imagined that life was a thin film on the outside of the planet, a delicate green skin clinging to the surface, with nothing but dead rock below. But when scientists began to drill deep into the earth and to descend into the deepest mines, they found something they had not expected. Life was down there too. In water trapped in the pores of rocks far underground, in the cracks of stone miles beneath the surface, they found microbes, tiny single creatures, alive and patiently enduring. The deeper they looked, the more they found. Life had quietly settled into the deep earth, far below anywhere we had ever thought to search for it. These are not creatures like any we know above. They live in a world with almost no energy, where there is no sunlight and often no oxygen and very little of anything to feed on. And so they have learned to live slowly, unimaginably slowly. Some of these deep microbes may go thousands of years between one cell division and the next, sipping the faintest trickle of energy from the rock and the water around them, barely alive by the standards of the busy surface, and yet undeniably living. While whole civilizations rose and fell in the sunlight above, a single one of these deep cells might have been quietly waiting, patient and still, to divide just once. What makes this stranger and grander still is how much of it there is. When scientists added up all this hidden life, deep in the rocks beneath the continents and far below the floor of the sea, they found that the buried biosphere is enormous. The total amount of living matter down there may rival or even exceed all the life on the entire surface of the world. All the forests, all the animals, all the people, all the fish in the sea may be matched in sheer mass by the silent, slow, hidden life within the rock below. The living world we know, in all its noise and color, may be only half the story. The other half is underground, in the dark, holding very still. It is worth saying that this is a young science and the numbers are still being worked out. Just how much life lies hidden in the deep, and how slowly it truly lives, and how far down it reaches, are all questions scientists are still exploring, sending drills deeper and studying what comes up. But the discovery itself is solid and astonishing. The Earth is alive far below the surface, in places we had always assumed were barren stone. There is something profoundly moving in this if you let it reach you. We tend to feel that life is rare and fragile, a small miracle balanced on the thin surface of one lucky world. And yet it turns out that life has soaked down into the very rock, filling the hidden spaces of the planet, enduring in darkness and pressure and silence where we never dreamed anything could survive. Life is not a thin skin on the earth. It runs deep, far deeper than we knew, reaching far down into the stone. There is comfort in that too. The world is more alive than it appears and more patient than we can easily imagine. Far beneath your feet, in the warm dark of the deep rock, countless small lives are quietly enduring, asking almost nothing, keeping on across spans of time that dwarf our own. They do not hurry or strive. They simply persist, gently and faithfully, in the deep places of the world. So tonight, as you rest on the surface of the living earth, picture that hidden world far below you. Down in the dark stone, in the cracks and the pores and the trapped pockets of water, countless tiny creatures are holding still, alive and patient, in a silence older than memory. They have been there far longer than we have, and they ask for nothing but to quietly go on. Let their deep and unhurried patience settle over you now, like a blanket of warm earth, as you let go and rest and drift down gently into sleep. The air you are breathing right now was once the deadliest poison on earth. It is a strange thing to imagine, lying here and breathing so easily, each gentle breath filling you with the oxygen your body needs. But there was a time very long ago when oxygen was not the gift of life at all. It was a toxin, a pollutant, a deadly waste that poisoned nearly everything alive. The very gas that now keeps you and the forests and the animals and all of us going began its story as one of the greatest disasters the world has ever known. To understand this, you have to travel back more than 2 billion years to a young and unfamiliar Earth. The land was bare and gray. The seas were strange, rich in dissolved iron, and the sky held almost no oxygen at all. And the life of that world was utterly different from ours. It was all tiny and simple, single creatures drifting in the water, and they had learned to live entirely without oxygen. To them, oxygen was not air. It was harmful, even deadly, the way a poison is to us. They lived in a world with none of it, and that suited them perfectly. Then something new appeared. A small, humble form of life, a kind of microbe floating in the sunlit shallows, discovered a wonderful new trick. It learned to take in sunlight and water and the carbon in the air, and to use them to make its own food. We call this photosynthesis, and it is the same gift that green plants use today. But this new way of living had a byproduct, a leftover waste that the tiny creatures simply released into the water and the air. That waste was oxygen. At first, almost nothing changed. The oxygen they breathed out was swallowed up by the iron in the seas and the rocks, soaked away as quickly as it appeared, staining the world in great rusty layers we can still find today. But the little creatures kept multiplying and kept breathing out their oxygen, slowly, patiently across hundreds of millions of years. And eventually, the seas and the rocks could drink no more. The oxygen began to gather in the water and then to rise into the sky, building and building until the whole atmosphere of the earth had changed. For most of the life on the planet, this was a catastrophe. All those ancient creatures that could not bear oxygen now found their world filling with it, a rising tide of poison with nowhere to hide. Vast numbers of them perished. It may have been one of the greatest die-offs in the history of life, a quiet apocalypse with no roar and no fire, only the slow and invisible spread of a deadly gas. We cannot count the dead because they were too small and too long ago to leave us their bones. But the world that came after was profoundly changed. emptied of much of what had lived before. There's a strange and humbling lesson in that. Life itself, simply by living, transformed the entire planet and very nearly undid itself in the process. The creatures that breathed out the oxygen did not mean to poison the world. They were only living, only growing, only doing what life does. And in doing so, they changed the very air of the earth forever in a way that no creature could have foreseen or prevented. And yet, out of that disaster came everything we are. Because once the air was full of oxygen, a door opened that had never existed before. Oxygen carries a great deal of energy, far more than the older ways of living could ever gather. And the creatures that learned to use it, rather than fear it, suddenly had the power to grow larger and more complex and more active than anything that had come before. From that poisoned air rose the long line of larger life, the animals, the plants we know, and eventually, after a very long while, us. The catastrophe became the foundation. The poison became the breath of life. So the next time you take a slow, deep breath, remember where it came from. The oxygen filling your lungs is the ancient waste of tiny creatures who lived and died billions of years ago. A poison that once swept across the world and remade it utterly. It killed almost everything, and then it made everything else possible. The air is a gift handed down from a catastrophe so old it has no name. So tonight, breathe gently and easily and feel that ancient air moving softly in and out of you. It is older than the mountains, older than the oceans in their present shape, born from the patient breathing of the smallest lives the world has ever held. A poison turned to a blessing, drifting in and out of you as you settle down to rest. Long ago, the entire Earth may have frozen into a ball of ice. Not just the poles, white and cold as they are today. The night, ice stretching from pole to pole, across every sea and every shore, even at the warm middle of the planet where the sun beats down most strongly. For a stretch of time so distant it is hard to imagine, the Earth may have been a frozen white marble, locked in ice from top to bottom, drifting silent and pale through the dark of space. Scientists call this astonishing chapter Snowball Earth. It happened more than 500 million years ago, in a world long before any animal walked or swam. And when you picture it, picture a planet almost unrecognizable. The oceans, frozen over, perhaps to a great depth, their surface is a vast unbroken plain of ice reaching to every horizon. There was no open water glinting in the sun, no warm shallow seas, only cold and white and stillness across the entire face of the world. If you could have stood on that ice at what is now the equator, in the hottest heart of the tropics, you would have found yourself in a frozen desert, colder than anything on Earth today. How could such a thing happen? It seems the world fell into a kind of runaway chill. Ice is bright and white, and it reflects sunlight back into space rather than soaking up its warmth. So as the ice spread, the planet reflected away more and more of the sun's heat, which made it colder still, which let the ice spread further, which cooled the world even more. Once that cycle took hold, it ran away with itself, the ice marching down from the poles toward the equator, the planet growing colder and whiter with every step until much of the world, perhaps nearly all of it, lay frozen beneath the ice. And here scientists are still genuinely divided, in a debate that is far from settled. Some believe the freeze was total, that the entire ocean iced over completely, a hard white shell wrapped around the whole planet. Others think a thin band of open or slushy water may have survived around the equator, a narrow ring of dark sea in a world of ice. This gentler picture is sometimes called slushball Earth, and the question of which is true, a world frozen solid or a world with one last open sea, is one that researchers are still working to answer. The rocks from that time hold many clues, but they do not yet tell the whole story. What everyone agrees on is even more remarkable. Somehow, life endured. Through all that cold and dark, in pockets near warm volcanic vents, or beneath the ice, or in whatever slush remained, living things held on. And when the great freeze finally ended, the world that thawed gave rise, not long after, to the first complex animals the Earth had ever seen. The deep freeze was not the end of life. It may have been one of the trials that shaped what came next. The freeze ended in a way that is almost poetic. All through those frozen ages, the volcanoes of the Earth kept erupting, as they always do, breathing out their gases into the sky. Normally, rain and rocks slowly pull those gases back down, but on a frozen world with the ice sealing everything away, there was nothing to remove them. And so across millions of years, those warming gases built up in the air, thicker and thicker, until at last they tipped the balance the other way. The ice began to melt, and once it started, the same runaway cycle that had frozen the world now worked in reverse. The melting feeding the warming feeding the melting, until the great white shell broke apart and the blue oceans returned to the light. There is something humbling in knowing that our gentle, temperate world has worn such a different face. We think of the Earth as it is now, green and blue and mild, and assume it has always been so. That the planet has moods that play out across hundreds of millions of years, and once, long ago, it was a silent white sphere of ice, frozen nearly from pole to pole. The world we know is only its present season. So tonight, as you lie warm beneath your blankets, picture that ancient frozen Earth hanging quiet and pale in the dark. A whole world of ice, smooth and white and still, with the slow, patient warmth gathering unseen, waiting to bring it back to life. The cold did not last forever. The world thawed and softened and grew green again. And you, wrapped warm against the night, can let that deep stillness settle over you and drift gently off to sleep. The largest desert on Earth was once a green land full of lakes. The Sahara, that vast ocean of sand and stone stretching across the top of Africa, one of the driest, harshest places in all the world, where rain almost never falls and the dunes roll on for 1,000 miles. It is hard to imagine anything but emptiness there. And yet only a few thousand years ago, a blink of time in the life of the planet, the Sahara was not a desert at all. It was green. Grasslands rolled where the dunes now lie. Rivers ran, and great lakes shimmered under the sun, and herds of animals moved across a living landscape, with people living among them. We know this is true because the desert remembers. Hidden among the rocks of the Sahara are ancient paintings made by human hands long ago, and they show a world that seems impossible there now. They show wide rivers and tall grass, hippos wallowing in the shallows, crocodiles and giraffes, and cattle grazing on green hillsides. In the very heart of the greatest desert on Earth, there are even paintings of people swimming, left by those who lived there when the water was real. And beneath the sand, scientists have found the dried beds of enormous vanished lakes, and the bones of creatures that could never survive there today. It was a vast and gentle world, that green Sahara, Picture wide grasslands rippling in the wind where now there is only sand, dotted with shining lakes and threaded by slow rivers. Herds of antelope and wild cattle moved across the plains. Fish swam in the lakes and flocks of birds gathered at the water's edge in the evening. Whole communities of people made their homes there, fishing and herding and raising their children beside the water, in a green and living land that has now vanished so completely it can seem like a dream. How could such a green world turn to endless sand? The answer lies not on the earth, but in the slow tilting and wobbling of the planet itself. As the earth travels around the sun, it spins like a great top, and like a top, its axis slowly wobbles, tracing a wide circle over many thousands of years. That gentle wobble changes ever so slightly how the sunlight falls across the world through the seasons. And a few thousand years ago, the wobble was such that the summer sun fell more strongly on northern Africa, pulling the great seasonal rains far to the north, deep into what is now desert. The rains came year after year, and the Sahara bloomed. Then, slowly, the wobble carried on, as it always does. The angle of the planet shifted. The summer sun grew weaker over the north, and the rains drew back toward the south. Over a span of time that was brief by the measure of the earth, the lakes shrank, the grasses withered, the rivers fell silent, and the sand crept in. The people and the animals moved away, following the water, and the desert we know today settled slowly into place, burying the green world beneath it. And here's the quiet wonder at the heart of it. That wobble has not stopped. It is still turning, slowly and faithfully, as it has for billions of years. Which means that one day, far in the future, the angle will come around again. The summer sun will once more fall strongly on northern Africa, and the great rains will return to the Sahara, and the desert will grow green once more. Lakes will refill, and grasses will spread again across the sand. The largest desert on earth will bloom once more, as it has many times before, in a slow rhythm of green and gold that has played out over and over across the ages. We tend to think of a desert as a permanent thing, fixed and eternal, the way it has always been within memory. But the Sahara is not a fixed place at all. It is a phase, one breath in a long, slow cycle of wet and dry, green and bare, that the planet turns through again and again. The sand we see is only the desert's present mood, and beneath it sleeps the memory and the promise of grass and water. It is a gentle reminder that even the harshest places are not forever, and even the most barren ground holds the seed of its own return. The world is always slowly turning, always changing its face, in rhythms far too vast for a single life to witness, but real all the same. So tonight, picture the great desert under the stars, silent and still, its dunes silver in the moonlight, and know that far beneath that endless sand lie the beds of ancient lakes, waiting. The rains will come again in their own slow time, and the green will return. The Sahara is only dreaming of water now, as you too drift down softly into your own dreams. All the land in the world was once joined into a single great continent. Every place you have ever heard of, every country and coastline, every far-flung shore was once pressed together into one enormous mass of land, surrounded by one vast and lonely ocean. You could have walked from what is now Africa to what is now America without ever crossing the sea. The world had only one continent, and we have given it a name. We call it Pangaea, which means simply all the earth. It is a strange and wonderful thing to picture, a single landmass so huge that its center lay thousands of miles from any coast, baked under endless sun, far from the cooling breath of the sea. One great ocean wrapping the rest of the world, deeper and wider than any sea today. This was the face of the Earth a little over 200 million years ago, when the first dinosaurs were beginning to walk. They could roam across the whole of the land, from one end of the world to the other, on a single unbroken continent. But the ground beneath our feet, solid as it feels, is not truly still. The hard outer shell of the Earth is broken into great pieces, vast slabs of rock called plates, and they float upon the hot, slow-moving rock below. Over millions of years, these plates drift, carried along like rafts on a current too slow to see. They move only as fast as your fingernails grow, an inch or two a year. But given enough time, that gentle drift can carry a continent clear across the world. And so slowly, Pangaea began to break apart. Great cracks opened across the single landmass. The pieces pulled away from one another, and new oceans poured in to fill the widening gaps. The fragments drifted apart across the ages, until they came to rest, for now, as the familiar continents we know today. You can still see the ghost of that ancient joining if you look at a map of the world. The eastern coast of South America and the western coast of Africa curve in a way that seems to match, two shorelines that look as though they were once pressed together and then slowly torn apart. They were. Those facing coasts are the broken edges of Pangaea, drifted thousands of miles across the ocean from one another, and yet still carrying the shape of the place where they once joined. That drifting has never stopped. Even now, as you lie here, the continents are moving slowly and silently beneath the ocean and the open sky. The Atlantic is growing a little wider each year. Other seas are slowly closing. The map of the world is not fixed. It is a single frame in a film that plays out over hundreds of millions of years, and if you could watch it sped up, you would see the continents wander across the face of the Earth like clouds drifting across a sky. And here's the part that stirs the imagination. If the continents were once joined and are always drifting, then one day, far in the future, they may come together again. Many scientists believe that the slow movement of the plates will eventually gather all the land back into a single supercontinent, a new Pangaea, a future world with one great mass of land once more. It may happen a couple of 100 million years from now, long after we are gone. Exactly how the continents will arrange themselves and just where the new supercontinent will lie is something scientists can only estimate, sketching different possible futures from the slow motions we can see today. But the broad rhythm seems clear. The land gathers and breaks apart and gathers again, over and over, across the long ages of the Earth. This has happened before too, more than once. Pangaea was not the first great gathering of the land. Earlier still, in times almost too distant to grasp, other supercontinents rose and split and scattered, each one assembling and breaking apart in its turn. The Earth has been slowly breathing in this way, gathering its land together and letting it drift apart for billions of years. A rhythm so vast and so slow that no creature could ever watch a single cycle from beginning to end. There is a deep peace in knowing this. The world we map and memorize, with its careful borders and its familiar shapes, is only a passing arrangement, one fleeting moment in an endless slow shuffle of the land. Nothing about the map is permanent. The continents are travelers, drifting through deep time, parting and meeting and parting again, in emotion far too patient for us ever to feel. So tonight, as you rest, imagine the great slow drift beneath you. The continents are moving, even now, carried on their deep and silent currents, too slow to see but never still. Long ago they were one. Far in the future, they may be one again. And between those two distant gatherings, here we are, resting quietly on the drifting land as it carries us gently through the night. The North Pole is slowly wandering across the top of the world. We think of the North Pole as the most fixed and certain place on Earth, a single still point at the very top of the planet, where all the lines of the map meet and the spin of the world holds steady. But that point is not steady at all. It drifts. The true North Pole, the spot where the Earth's spinning axis meets the surface, wanders in slow, looping paths across the ice, shifting from one year to the next, never quite resting in the same place twice. The wandering is small by our everyday measure, only a few yards across a year. But it is real, and it never stops, and scientists watch it carefully with instruments precise enough to follow it. The pole traces little spirals and loops over the seasons, nudged this way and that by the great shifting weights of the world. When the ice melts in one place, or the oceans pile up in another, or vast amounts of water move across the surface, the balance of the spinning Earth changes ever so slightly, and the pole drifts in response. In recent times, the melting of distant ice has been enough to tug the wandering pole onto a new path. The very top of the world moves with the water and the ice, leaning gently as the planet's burden shifts. It is a strange thing to realize that the top of the world keeps no fixed address. For most of the last century, the wandering pole crept slowly in one direction, year after year. And then, not long ago, it changed its course and began drifting another way entirely, swayed by the great movement of meltwater and the shifting weight of the seas. The point we call true north is forever adjusting itself, nudged by every ton of ice and water that moves across the face of the Earth. That alone is strange enough, that true north should be a slowly moving thing. But the deeper truth is stranger still, and it reaches far beyond the small yearly wander of the pole. Over the immense spans of geological time, the entire solid Earth can tip, not the continents drifting apart from one another, but the whole outer body of the planet, all at once, rolling like a vast ball to face a new direction. The Earth keeps spinning around the same axis in space, steady as ever, but the rock and the land that make up the outside of the planet can slowly shift their whole position around that axis, so that places which once sat near the equator may, over millions of years, end up closer to the poles, and the frozen ends of the Earth may drift toward the warmth of the middle. It happens for a quiet reason. A spinning thing prefers to carry its heaviest parts around its widest middle, the way a spun top settles into balance. So if great masses gather or shift inside the Earth over the ages, a huge upwelling of rock perhaps, or the slow piling of material deep below, the planet will very gradually roll to bring that extra weight toward the equator, rebalancing itself as it turns. The whole shell of the world tips and resettles, carrying every continent and ocean with it, while the spin axis itself never moves. Scientists can read the traces of this in very old rocks, which quietly recorded the direction to the pole at the moment they formed, like tiny frozen compasses. And those ancient rocks suggest that the Earth has indeed tipped and rolled in its deep past, sometimes by surprising amounts. Just how much and exactly when is still debated, and the great tipping events of long ago are pieced together carefully from faint and scattered clues. But the idea itself is sound. The face the Earth turns toward its own poles is not fixed forever. Given enough time, the whole world can slowly roll. There is something dizzying and beautiful in that thought. We build our whole sense of direction on the certainty of north, the fixed star of the compass, the steady top of the world. And yet north itself wanders from year to year, and across the deep ages the entire planet can turn beneath the sky, carrying the very poles to new ground. Nothing is quite as fixed as it seems. Even the ends of the earth are slowly on the move. So tonight, as you lie still beneath the turning sky, let yourself feel how gently everything drifts. The North Pole is wandering its slow, small loops across the ice, even now, nudged by the moving water of the world. And far beneath, across spans of time beyond imagining, the whole great Earth leans and rolls in its own unhurried search for balance. The world is always quietly settling itself, always finding its way. And you can let yourself settle too, here in the dark, and drift softly off to sleep. Long ago, the Earth may have worn a ring across its sky, like Saturn. It is a beautiful and startling thought. We know Saturn for its glorious rings, those bright bands of ice and rock circling the planet, and we think of them as something exotic and far away, belonging to other worlds. But there is a new idea, proposed only very recently, that suggests our own Earth may once have had a ring of its own, arching across the heavens for millions of years, long before any human looked up to see it. Let me be clear from the start that this is a young and uncertain idea, a recent theory rather than settled fact. Scientists have put it forward as a possible explanation for a strange puzzle, and it is still being examined and tested and argued over. It may turn out to be true, or it may not, but it is grounded in real evidence, and it is well worth wondering about here in the dark. The puzzle is this: around 460 million years ago, in a chapter of Earth's history long before the dinosaurs, the planet seems to have been struck by an unusual flurry of falling rock. Scientists have found a cluster of impact craters from that time, the scars of many meteorites that fell within a relatively short span. And when they looked at where those craters lay on the ancient Earth, accounting for how the continents have drifted since, they noticed something odd. The craters were not scattered randomly across the globe, the way falling rocks usually are. Instead, they were gathered in a narrow band close to the equator, as though the meteorites had rained down from a single line across the sky. What could make rocks fall only along the equator? One team of scientists proposed a remarkable answer. Imagine, they said, that a large asteroid wandered too close to the Earth, closer than a certain invisible boundary where a planet's pole grows strong enough to tear a passing body apart. The asteroid would have been pulled to pieces, shattered into countless fragments, and those fragments would have spread out into a ring circling the Earth above the equator, just as the rings of Saturn circle that distant world. For millions of years, the idea goes, the Earth may have carried this ring of broken rock across its sky, and slowly, over that long stretch of time, the fragments would have drifted down, one by one, falling to the ground in a band along the equator, leaving exactly the strange cluster of craters we find today. There is more to the idea still. A ring like that, hanging across the sky, would have cast a shadow on the Earth below, shading part of the planet from the sun. And some scientists wonder whether that shadow might help explain another mystery from around the same time, a period when the Earth grew strikingly cold. Perhaps they suggest the ring's shadow helped chill the world. It is a bold and elegant thought, tying together falling rocks and a cooling planet under the shade of a vanished ring. But it is important to hold all of this gently. This is one possible story, freshly proposed, and not everyone is convinced. Other explanations for the craters and the cold may yet prove better. The ring, if it ever existed, is long gone, and we cannot reach back to see it directly. What we have are clues in the ancient rock, and a daring idea that tries to make sense of them. That is how science often begins, with a wondering, a possibility, a thread worth pulling. Whether this one holds, only time and further study will tell. And yet, picture it for a moment, true or not, an Earth with a ring hundreds of millions of years ago. A bright band of rock and dust stretched across the daytime sky, arcing from one horizon to the other, casting its faint shadow across an empty world. At night, perhaps, it would have caught the sunlight from beyond the planet's edge and glowed softly overhead, a pale arch among the stars. There were no eyes to see it then, no one to marvel at a ringed Earth hanging in its own quiet sky. It would have turned above the silent seas for ages, beautiful and unwitnessed, and then slowly faded as its rocks rained down and were gone. So tonight, let yourself dream of that possible ancient sky, an Earth wearing a ring like a distant cousin of Saturn, glowing faint and silver over a world too young for wonder. It may have been real, or it may be only a lovely idea, but either way, it is a gift to imagine. Here in the soft dark, picture that gentle arc of light above the early Earth and let it carry you quietly down into your dreams. There are tiny specks of dust on this planet that are older than the sun. It sounds impossible. The sun is the oldest thing in our sky, the great fire around which everything turns. Older than the Earth, older than the moon, the very source of our days. And yet, hidden inside certain rare stones that have fallen from space, there are tiny grains of material that are older still. They are older than the sun, older than the Earth, older than the whole solar system we call home. They are, quite simply, the most ancient things that human hands have ever held. To understand where they came from, you have to go back to before the beginning, before there was a sun or an Earth at all. The story of these grains starts among other stars, long dead now, that lived and died before our sun was ever born. When an old star reaches the end of its life, it sheds its outer layers into space, breathing out clouds of gas and freshly made dust into the dark between the stars. Tiny grains of solid matter form in those dying breaths, hard little specks forged in the last days of a star. And these grains drift through the cold of space for ages, wandering between the stars, long after the star that made them is gone. Some of those ancient grains were floating in the great cloud of dust and gas that eventually collapsed to form our own sun and its planets. Most were swept up and melted and remade in the fire of that creation. But a few, a precious few, survived. They were caught up in small bodies, lumps of rock and dust that never grew into planets, and there they stayed untouched for billions of years. And every now and then, one of those ancient lumps falls to Earth as a meteorite, carrying its cargo of stardust safely down to the ground. When scientists carefully break such meteorites open and study the tiny grains inside, they can measure their age. And some of those grains turn out to be around 7 billion years old, far older than our 5 billion-year-old sun. They are stardust from other stars, older than our own, resting now in trays in quiet laboratories, the most ancient matter ever found. And it is not only visitors from space that carry such deep time. Even here, in the rock of the Earth itself, there are pieces almost as old as the planet. The Earth formed around 4.5 billion years ago, and most of its first surface has long since been melted, buried, and remade many times over. But in a few rare places, tiny crystals have survived from almost the very beginning. Hard little grains that have endured every upheaval the planet could throw at them. The oldest of these are nearly 4.5 billion years old, formed when the Earth itself was barely young. To hold one is to hold a piece of the infant world, a survivor from a time when the planet's surface was still cooling, older than the oceans, older than the continents, older than life. There is something that quiets the soul in all of this. We live such brief lives, a handful of decades, and we measure time in days and years. And here, scattered across the earth and fallen from the sky, are objects that have endured for billions of years, that watched whole stars be born and die, that are older than the ground beneath us and older than the light of our own sun. They make our little moment feel very small, and yet there is comfort in it too, a sense of belonging to something vast and ancient and ongoing. For these grains are not truly strangers to us. The same stardust that fell from dying stars, older than the sun, is the very stuff that everything is made of. The rock and the sea and the trees, and you. Every atom in your body was forged inside some ancient star long ago and drifted across the dark before becoming part of this world and part of you. You are made of star stuff older than the sun, gathered for a little while into a living, breathing person, lying here in the quiet night. So tonight, as you drift towards sleep, hold that gentle thought close. Somewhere on this earth, in a quiet drawer, there rests a grain of dust, born in a dying star 7 billion years ago, older than the sun that warms us. And the very same ancient stardust lives in you, in every part of you, carried down through unimaginable time to this single peaceful moment. You are old and you are made of stars, and you are exactly where you belong as you close your eyes and rest. And so we come to the end of our wandering, 20 strange truths about this quiet, astonishing world. If you have drifted off somewhere along the way, then this was never meant for your waking ears, and I hope your dreams are gentle. But if you are still here with me, still awake in the soft dark, then perhaps you are not quite ready for the night to end. If that is so, there is another long and peaceful video waiting for you. Another quiet wandering through the wonders of the world, ready to carry you onward whenever you wish. You need only let it begin and let yourself sink back down into the calm. For now, though, let it all go. Let the hidden ocean deep inside the earth and the ancient stardust older than the sun and the slow drifting of the continents settle softly into the back of your mind. You do not need to hold on to any of it. Let the wonders fade like the last embers of a fire, warm and dim and gently dying down as sleep rises up to meet you. You are resting on a strange and beautiful world, turning quietly through the dark, carrying you safely through the night as it always has. There is nothing left to do now, nothing to think about, nothing to be. only rest and stillness and the slow turning of the earth beneath you. Close your eyes, my friend, let go, and drift. Sweet dreams among the stars.